At just 17 years old, Ross came face to face with mortality, experiencing a near-death encounter that wasn't at the hands of a stranger, but rather inflicted by someone he had once considered a close friend. As he lay in a pool of blood, he struggled to comprehend why his childhood friend had attempted to take his life. The shocking truth unfolded before him several days later. Ross Capicchioni was born in Detroit in 1990, a city where crime rates were on the rise during his youth. Despite this, Ross stayed clear of trouble, focusing on his high school years, where he was an enthusiastic skater and enjoyed hanging out with friends. As he turned 17, many of his friends unfortunately started going astray, getting involved in minor offenses that gradually escalated into more serious crimes. Ross, however, was determined not to get drawn into the underworld. He was keen on living his life to the fullest without ruining it with bad decisions. On a seemingly normal day in 2007, an unexpected event occurred. A friend, whom Ross had known for about a decade, paid him an unannounced visit. After a brief chat, this friend asked Ross for a favor: to drive him to his cousin's house in the eastern part of Detroit. This area was notorious for its high crime rate, where the sound of gunshots was not uncommon, and even the police were often reluctant to intervene. Ross was initially reluctant, well aware of the dangers of the east side of Detroit. He refused his friend's request, not wishing to put himself in unnecessary danger. However, his friend was persistent, continuously asking over the course of a week. He even offered Ross $30 for gas as an incentive, leveraging their long-standing friendship to sway his decision. Feeling the weight of their decade-long friendship, Ross eventually conceded. On the day of the incident, after finishing school, Ross and his friend stopped at a gas station where the friend handed over the money for gas. As they drove towards the east side, Ross couldn't shake off an eerie feeling of danger. Despite his instincts screaming that something was amiss, he pushed these thoughts aside, trusting in the bond he had with his friend. The friend occasionally signaled where to turn, guiding Ross through the unfamiliar terrain of Detroit's east side, an area he had consciously avoided until then. The ride was tense, marked by silence. Ross felt an inexplicable tension, a foreboding sense that something bad was about to happen. The nervousness of his companion only added to his unease. They drove through the steep streets of the east side, a place likened to a third-world country due to its notorious reputation for violence and crime. Eventually, his friend instructed Ross to turn and park behind a house. As they got out of the car, Ross surveyed his surroundings, trying to make sense of where they were. It was a normal neighborhood setting, with houses close by and a grassy area separated by a fence. Suddenly, Ross heard a gunshot, its sound piercing the silence like a cruel interruption of reality. A sharp, excruciating pain surged through his left arm, a sensation so intense that it momentarily paralyzed his thoughts. As he glanced down, disbelief and horror intertwined within him at the sight of his arm, gruesomely injured and hanging unnaturally, like a grotesque prop from a horror movie. Blood was gushing out in torrents, painting a vivid and terrifying picture of his dire situation. He looked up, his heart pounding against his chest, to find his friend just 10 feet away, with a shotgun in hand, pointing it directly at him. The betrayal stung deeper than the physical pain. In a state of shock, Ross's mind raced with confusion and disbelief. "Did you shoot me?" he managed to ask, his voice a mix of incredulity and dread, only to be met with another blast. This time to his chest, the impact was like a forceful punch, creating a wound so large it was surreal, akin to a grotesque distortion of reality. As Ross dropped to his knees, the world around him began to blur. Each breath was a battle, gasping for air as if he were drowning on dry land. He felt the cold, unfeeling barrel of the shotgun against his head. In a split second of sheer survival instinct, Ross smacked it away, a move that probably saved his life. The shot sprayed, sparing him a fatal head wound. Even as he lay severely injured, consciousness clung to him stubbornly. He felt the brutal assault continue as his attacker hit him in the face with the butt of the gun, the pain exploding across his face, knocking out his teeth. As Ross collapsed, a wave of helplessness engulfed him, his mind screaming in protest while his body succumbed to the brutal reality. He was dimly aware of his assailant rifling through his pockets for the car keys, a final insult to his already battered being. He watched, powerless and fading, as his Jeep commander was driven away, abandoning him to his critical condition. The 17-year-old lay in a pool of his own blood, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of pain, betrayal, and the stark realization of his mortality. The choice before him was stark and primitive: to lie there and accept death, or to summon the will to live. Despite the agonizing pain and the overwhelming urge to succumb to the darkness encroaching on the edges of his consciousness, a primal force within him stirred. His body, though weakened and racked with pain from the gunshot wound to the chest and the significant head trauma, refused to yield. With an almost supernatural effort, he felt as though unseen arms were lifting him from beneath, enabling him to stand and stumble forward a few feet before collapsing again. The gunshots alarmed the neighborhood. A man, a probation officer who happened to be at a stoplight nearby, saw the wounded young man fall out of nowhere, all bloody in broad daylight. He immediately called the police. Running to Ross, he was determined to keep him awake until help arrived. The officer's hand on Ross's back, his words of encouragement, struggled to keep Ross conscious. But Ross was on the brink of exhaustion, fighting the urge to succumb to the pain and sleep, which he knew meant death. The last thing he remembers before losing consciousness was the officer's voice urging him to hold on, and the arrival of the paramedics, who were shocked yet reassuring as they loaded him into the ambulance. Upon arrival at the hospital, Ross showed no signs of life. He was pronounced dead on arrival, and doctors were on the verge of placing him in a body bag. However, Dr. Disney decided to attempt resuscitation despite Ross's dire condition. Miraculously, they heard heartbeats and quickly took him to the operating room. Ross underwent heart surgery, and a ventilator supported his breathing for 24 hours. The operation's success was uncertain until 3 days later, as Ross remained unconscious during this period. When he finally opened his eyes, his vision was initially white and blurry. He was confused, disoriented, and initially thought he was dead. Slowly, his surroundings came into focus, and he realized he was in a hospital. With a breathing tube and unable to speak, he was in a state of shock. The medical staff, including a nurse who had been watching over him, were elated to see him awake. They removed the breathing tube, allowing Ross to breathe on his own. He coughed up blood and debris from his injuries but was breathing independently. The medical team was eager to identify him and learn what had happened. His only recollection was his father's phone number. His parents, who had been unaware of his whereabouts for 3 days, received a call from the hospital informing them that their son had been found alive but severely injured. After 5 days in the hospital, Ross was sent home. His recovery was remarkable, but it was just the beginning of a long journey. While he was recuperating at home, FBI agents visited him. They showed him a photo of a young man who was in custody, and Ross immediately recognized him as the one who had nearly taken his life. This revelation was shocking, but what haunted Ross the most was not knowing why his life was almost taken. The motive behind the attack was soon uncovered. On that fateful day, the attacker was on a special mission to become a member of a gang in Detroit. His initiation required him to commit murder. The attacker thought Ross would be an easy target. However, his plan to become a tough guy was thwarted. He was arrested after he called a friend to brag about the shooting, not realizing that his friend would alert the authorities. The attacker was met by a SWAT team at his front yard and taken into custody. Ross had to go to court to testify against his friend, facing him and his family. Despite his weakened state, Ross told his story in court, sitting in front of 40 of his assailant's family members. His attacker, who appeared in court dressed in a purple suit, top hat, and sunglasses, couldn't look Ross in the eye. The judge thanked Ross for surviving, pointing out that if Ross had died, the attacker would have faced a life sentence. Instead, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The name of Ross's attacker was never revealed to the public. It is only known that he was 2 years younger than Ross. The incident left Ross with profound physical and emotional scars, but it also instilled in him a deep appreciation for life and a determination to move forward. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the other great content on our channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.